Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to a session covering Estructura 9.1 y 9.2. Primero vamos a hablar de los verbos en el pretérito que son irregulares. Si tienen su libro, estamos en la página 310. La página 310 en el libro Vistas. Para comenzar, you guys already know about the verbs ir and ser, and that they're irregular in the preterite. We worked with those in Lesson 8. And if you remember, they were conjugated fui, fuiste, fue, fuimos, fueron. And now today what we're going to look at are some other verbs who are also irregular in the preterite. Okay, and first of all, the publisher made a mistake on this one. This should say, oh no, it does. Mine just has a typo on it. Good, that's perfect. No, it doesn't. Never mind, I do see the typo. I'm going crazy here. Let's see. This should say venir instead of ver. And they have it correct right down there, but I noticed that when I was looking over my notes, that they have it incorrect there. So the preterite of tener, venir, and decir. And basically these three verbs are representative of what some other verbs will do as well. And they break them up into three groups. And these are just representatives from each of the groups. There's the U group, the I group, and the J group. So tener is coming from the U stem group. Venir comes from the I stem group. And decir is coming from the J stem group. You'll see what I mean in just a second. So the preterite of the verb tener is tuve, tuviste, tuvo, tuvimos, and tuvieron. Otra vez, repiten por favor. Tuve, tuviste, tuvo, tuvimos, tuvieron. All right? And when we say that the verb tener is part of the U group, what we mean is that it has a U in its stem in the preterite. Okay? And there's some other verbs that we're going to look at that will also have U's in their stems. We'll look at those in just a second. Venir is another verb that is representative of the I group, and it will have an I in its stem, and there's a few other verbs that will do the same thing. So the verb venir, which meant to come, in the preterite is going to be vine, viniste, vino, vinimos, vinieron. Otra vez, repitan por favor. Vine, viniste, vino, vinimos, vinieron. The last verb that we have here comes from the J group, and it's the verb decir. And you'll come to find that many verbs that end in CIR will be part of the J group. It gets conjugated dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijeron. Otra vez, repitan por favor. Dije, dijiste, dijo, dijimos, dijeron. All right? The thing I want you to notice here is that each of these verbs has a new stem. So tener stem is tuv, venir stem is vin, decir stem is dich. Okay? Now, as far as the endings go, and comparing them to your regular preterite endings, the endings are going to be very similar, except for the yo form and the usted form, to the regular er verb endings in the preterite. But if you'll notice, tener and venir have the exact same endings as each other, and decir does as well, except for in the third person plural, instead of being I-E-R-O-N, it's going to be just E-R-O-N. See how tuvieron, vinieron, they have ieron as their endings, and when you get to dijeron, it's just D-I-J-E-R-O-N. You don't have the I there, so that's the only thing that's different. And what we're going to look at now are some other verbs that are in the U group. We'll start with it. They'll be verbs sort of like tener. They are poder, and its stem is going to be puv. Poner, stem is going to be pus. Saber is sup, and estar is estuv. And then those endings that we saw on the previous slide, none of them are accented, and they look very similar to your ER, IR verb preterite endings, but with no accents. And so when you put that all together for the verb poder, for example, you have pude, pudiste, pudo, pudimos, pudieron. For the verb poner, the stem is pus, so you're going to add those endings. You have puse, pusiste, puso, pusimos, and pusieron. For the verb saber, you have sup, supe, supiste, supo, supimos, supieron. And finally, for the verb estar, you have estuve is the stem, and it would be conjugated estuve, estuviste, estuvo, estuvimos, estuvieron. Next, we're going to look at two other verbs besides venir that are in the I group. The verb querer and the verb hacer are both considered, they have an I stem change in the preterite. So querer stem is going to be quis, and hacer stem is going to be is. Okay? And when you conjugate it, you're going to use those same endings. So we have quise, quisiste, quiso, quisimos, and quisieron. Otra vez, quise, quisiste, quiso, quisimos, quisieron. With the verb hacer, its stem is is, and there actually is something irregular happening here that your book isn't bringing your attention to, but we're going to talk about it. It's hice, hiciste, hizo, hicimos, hicieron. And I don't know if anyone can tell right away what's different with the verb hacer, but if you look at the third person singular, it's not H-I-C-O, but H-I-Z-O, and I want to try and do something to bring that to your attention. I'm looking what I can do here. Let's see. Maybe put a circle around it. That'll work. Okay. Hizo. And the reason why it's different is if it were the C-O, it would say k, ko, iko. And if you go through the other conjugations, they all have that nice S sound. Hice, hiciste, hicimos, hicieron. And to maintain that, the fluidity of that sound, you have to change the C to a Z. All right, so that's what's happening here. Please be sure that you're aware of that, because in your book and in the work online, it doesn't necessarily draw your attention to that. It just hopes that you're going to notice it. Okay? Moving along, we're going to look at some verbs in the J group other than decir. And the ones we're going to look at are traer, conducir, and traducir. And as I mentioned, most of these verbs in the J group will be CIR verbs. Traer, of course, is not, so let's look at it first. Its stem is going to be traj, traje, trajiste, trajo, trajimos, trajeron. And then conducir will be conduj as the stem, conduje, condujiste, condujo, condujimos, condujeron. Y luego para el verbo traducir, which means to translate, the stem is traduj, so traduje, tradujiste, tradujo, tradujimos, tradujeron. Y, ¿cómo les diré? Con esto, in the third person singular and plural, instead of the ending being I-E-R-O-N, it's just E-R-O-N, just for these verbs that are in the J group. Okay? Let's move on and talk a little bit more about the endings that these verbs have. The endings of these verbs are basically the regular preterite endings of the ER and IR verbs, except for the yo and the usted forms. And the thing that's different about them is that they don't have accents. And that's what we've been talking about earlier. Okay, and in the J group, most of the verbs end in CIR, which is what we've been speaking about earlier. And in the third person plural, remember that the ending is eron instead of ieron. So another verb could be producir, and because it ends in CIR, it is going to be a part of the J group. Okay? A ver, ¿qué sigue? Right, and this is just saying in the third person plural, remember that it's not I-E-R-O-N, it's E-R-O-N. Mis amigos trajeron comida a la fiesta, o ellos comieron muchos dulces. Comieron is not part of the J group, so we're seeing that the third person plural ending here is I-E-R-O-N, but when you're working with the J group, the third person plural ending is just E-R-O-N. Okay, and third person plural, remember, is just ustedes, ellos, ellas. The next thing I want us to look at is the verb dar. It's irregular, and it doesn't really fall into any of those groups, so let's look at it. Remember the verb dar means to give. So it will be di, diste, dio, dimos, dieron. Otra vez, repitan por favor. Di, diste, dio, dimos, dieron. Otra vez. Di, diste, dio, dimos, dieron. Muy bien. Working with the verb dar, keep in mind that there are no accent marks, and the endings are the same as the irregular ER and IR preterite verbs, except there's no accent marks. Just some examples of some sentences. La camarera me dio el menú. Le di a Juan algunos consejos. Los invitados le dieron un regalo. Nos dimos una gran fiesta. Nosotros dimos una gran fiesta, perdón. Y así you can see easily that the verb dar, basically you're taking off the AR and you're left with D, and you're putting those regular ER verb endings for the preterite tense, except there's no accent marks. Finally, what I'd like to talk about with the irregular preterites is the verb haber. If you'll remember the word I, which a lot of people like to pronounce hey, but it's pronounced I, and it meant there is or there are in the present tense. Its preterite form is hubo, and so in the past it's going to mean there was or there were. Okay, so if you want to say there wasn't any homework, no hubo tarea, no hubo tarea. And the last but not least, I would like for us to do a little bit of practice with these. There's 24 of them here. We'll just jump around and do a few of them. Let's see. Remember, the verb querer is part of the I group, so its stem is quis. And then for the tu ending, we're going to put our iste, quisiste. Ustedes, remember, decir is part of the J group, so it would be the usted dijo, ¿verdad? Not ustedes, but usted. Nosotras, and the verb hacer, remember, is part of the I group. So, hicimos, nosotras hicimos. Traer is a member of the J group. So you would have yo traje, if I can spell, traje, yo traje. Conducir is also part of the J group. So we have ellas, condujeron, ¿verdad? Condujeron. That doesn't look right to me, but I think it's just I'm by myself typing all these. Ellas condujeron. Sí, así es. And then the verb estar is part of the U group, so it'd be ella estuvo. And essentially, what you're going to have to do with these is memorize what the stem is for these irregular verbs. And the endings are basically your ER, IR verb endings from the preterite, except there's no accent marks. And then with the J group, just remember that in the third person plural, instead of being IERON, the ending is just ERON, like in número 5. And as you continue with this practice, if you have any questions, please feel free to email me and I'll be happy to help you. Let's move on to talking about verbs that change meaning in the preterite. And this information se encuentra en la página 314, la página 314 del libro, Vistas. And we're going to be talking about verbs that change meaning in the preterite. Okay. The verbs conocer, saber, poder, and querer change meaning when you use them in the preterite. And because of this, they each match up with more than one verb in English, depending on what tense of the verb you're using. And we'll see what we mean by this in just a second. For example, the verb conocer in the present tense means to know or to be acquainted with. Conozco a esa pareja. I know that couple. Now, in the preterite, though, it wouldn't be I knew or I became acquainted with. It means to meet, like to meet somebody. So, conocí a esa pareja ayer. I met that couple yesterday. Saber in the present tense means to know information or to know how to do something. Sabemos la verdad. We know the truth. Versus in the preterite, it means to find out or to learn. Supimos la verdad anoche, meaning we found out or we discovered the truth last night or we became aware of the truth last night. The other ones that we want to look at that are also have a different meaning in the preterite are poder and querer. Poder in the present tense means to be able to, or you can do something. Podemos hacerlo, we can do it. In the preterite, however, it's going to mean to manage or to succeed, like you tried it and you were able to do it. Pudimos hacerlo ayer, we managed to do it yesterday, or we were able to do it yesterday. We accomplished it yesterday. Querer, lo cual significa to want or to love. In the present tense, quiero ir a la fiesta, pero tengo que trabajar. I want to go to the party, but I have to work. In the preterite, querer va a significar to try. Quise evitar el accidente, pero fue imposible. I tried to avoid the accident, but it was impossible. No, quise there means to try, and it has more to do with the to want meaning rather than the to love meaning, as you can obviously see. In the preterite, the verbs poder and querer, depending on whether your sentence is positive or negative, can have different meanings. Pude means I was able to. No pude means I failed to, or basically I wasn't able to. To me, these kind of mean the same things. Quise significa I tried to, and no quise significa I refused to. Because, you know, when someone doesn't want to try to do something, if they're not trying, they're refusing to even attempt it, essentially. Okay, so with that in mind, if you read these sentences and think about what they're saying, por ejemplo, el número 1, yo no hice lo que me pidieron mis padres, tengo mis principios. And basically this is saying I didn't do what my parents asked me to do. I have my principles. And so your choices are either no quise hacerlo or no supe hacerlo. So the person is saying, I didn't do what my parents asked me. I have my principles with exclamation points around it. And so it's either saying I didn't want to do it or I didn't know how to do it. And the thing that would be most logical, in my opinion, would probably be I didn't want to do it. You know, if you're saying I have my principles, it's that you don't want to do something. No quise hacerlo. Número 2, hablamos por primera vez con Nuria y Ana en la boda. We spoke with them for the first time at the wedding, and you could either say las conocimos en la boda or las supimos en la boda. And las conocimos would be we met them at the wedding, or las supimos en la boda would be like we learned about them in the wedding, or we learned them in the wedding. Letter B really doesn't make any sense as an answer. The correct answer is A. We met them at the wedding. Número 3. Por fin hablé con mi hermana después de llamarlo 7 veces. How many times is 7 veces? 7 times. So he or she was finally able to speak with their brother after calling 7 times. Now, your choices are either no quise hablar con él or pude hablar con él. No quise hablar con él means I didn't even want to talk to him. And pude hablar con él means I was successful at speaking with him, or I succeeded in finally speaking with him. And after trying 7 times, letter B most clearly reflects the sentiment I was finally able to speak with him. No? And then the other practice that's here, let's see. Número 4. Josefina se acostó para relajarse. Se durmió inmediatamente. Inmediatamente should ring a bell for you from the word immediately in English. So Josefina lay down so she could relax, and she fell asleep immediately. Now your choices are either pudo relajarse or no pudo relajarse. She was able to relax, or she succeeded in relaxing, or she did not succeed. She failed at relaxing. If she fell asleep immediately, it sounds like she's pretty relaxed. So the best answer here would probably be A. All right. Después de mucho buscar, encontraste la definición en el diccionario. After much searching, you found the definition in the dictionary. La letra A, no supiste la respuesta, o B, supiste la respuesta. And respuesta, this should have an S right here. It's a typo too. Let's see, supiste la respuesta would be the best answer because you finally learned the answer to what the word meant. Número 6. Las chicas fueron a la fiesta, cantaron, bailaron mucho y hablaron con todos los invitados. A sería ellas pudieron divertirse, o B, ellas no supieron divertirse. A significa they were able to have fun. They succeeded in having a great time, entertaining themselves and having fun. Or B significa ellas no supieron divertirse. They didn't even know how to have fun. And it sounds like they had a great time. They danced, they spoke with everybody, they sang, so they were successful. They were able to have fun. And that would be la letra A. Hopefully those make sense to you. As you work through this part of the lesson, if you have any questions, feel free to email me, and I'll be happy to help you. The last thing I have for you is just a multiple choice question here, asking if you would be interested in continuing to study Spanish online in future semesters if the courses were available. Currently, just Spanish 101 and 102 are available online, and there has been some interest expressed in having some of the intermediate classes available. And I'm just trying to get a feel from my own students how many of you would be interested in pursuing further study of Spanish. And you can just check yes or no and click submit, and you'll be set. And I hope you have a fabulous day, and thank you for working through the archive, and I hope it was helpful for you.